Well, hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about why are the kids such idiots? It's a hard question, but more specifically, we're going to talk about why Generation Zoloft seems to be in love with bin Laden this week. A little bit of backstory. There was a trend going around TikTok where a bunch of TikTok influencers and general know-nothings read the bin Laden letter to America that he wrote in 2002, which outlined why he attacked the United States. And a bunch of these idiots thought that it was a good idea, or they were acting like they were in some sort of existential crisis, that's their words, because they read this letter and they said, oh my gosh, bin Laden's making some great points. So first of all, I want to play the video that caused this to blow up. So it was already going around on the internet when when a commentator on YouTube, a man named Yashar Ali, posted this compilation video of some of the things that were being said on TikTok. So I want to play a little bit of it. It's about 5 minutes long, but I'm not going to play all of it. And then we're going to talk about these. I don't have nice words for these people, these morons, these low IQ individuals, and why kids are susceptible to falling for this. But we're going to just play a little bit of the video first.
I read Letter to America, which is Osama bin Laden's letter.
This has 40 million
views, explaining why he attacked Americans. And I am ashamed to say that I not only have never read this letter, but I didn't even know this letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it. However, be forewarned that this has left me very disillusioned, and I feel the same exact way I felt when I was deconstructing Christianity. I feel a little bit just confused, like I entered into another timeline. What is this? And yeah, so go read it.
So I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same. I will never look at.
Oh, bin Laden really changed her life. First of all, why are you recording a video wearing a bonnet?
And if you haven't read it,
At least put yourself together.
Damn. You're also going through an existential crisis in this very moment, because in the last 20 minutes, my entire viewpoint on the entire life I have believed and I have lived.
It took her 20 minutes to read this letter. It's 2 pages long. It's probably because she's never read anything in her life.
Please read that entire letter.
I need everyone to stop what they're doing right now and go read. It's literally 2 pages. Go read A Letter to America. And please come back here and just let me know what you think. Because I feel like I'm going through like an existential crisis right now. And a lot of people are.
I don't know this lady's name who's speaking right now. I just paused the video because she, I was reading. So she says this. Oh, she's going through an existential crisis. She encourages everyone to go read bin Laden's thing. And I guess she was swept up in the TikTok ban, which we'll get into later, and her account got banned, and she was crying about it. Oh, can't believe the TikTok banned me. I just wanted to open a dialogue, blah, blah, blah. Oh, boo-hoo. Go cry more.
So I just need someone else to be feeling this too.
I need you to stop what you're doing and go read A Letter to America. It is literally the craziest thing I've read in a while. And while I can't say that I'm that surprised, I am pretty shocked. So go read it and tell me what you think, because I really also need to talk to other people about this. And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I can only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable violence is violence by the occupier.
So this is fucking insane. I just read Osama bin Laden's letter to mind fucks within certain nation.
By the way, I'm skipping this one because this woman doesn't really say anything useful. She just curses a lot. But you could tell she's not the most intelligent person of all time because she has her nose pierced in like 18 different places, and she clearly is not making good life choices. I just think anyone who pierces the top of your nose, you're not making good life choices out there. She just looks like the kind of person that you wouldn't enjoy being around, you know? Probably doesn't believe in deodorant or regular bathing. I just looks like one of those kind of people. Just nasty.
But those
for this next one up here we're going to play as a
we're all just the buildup of our government failing
By the way, just repeating terrorist propaganda points like Putin said, the reason why we're upset is because there's encroachment on our lands. Okay, that's a terrorist talking point. We'll get into that too. This next one doesn't have words, so I'm going to read it, but just
other nations.
Me, when I got the news in 2011 that we got him, all excited. In 2023, reading his letter to America, knowing he was right, I looked really upset. Oh,
in
man.
Majority of these situations that receive, but this is to our fucking
blah, blah, blah.
Type a letter to America in Google or whatever.
Yeah, there's another one encouraging. Oh, this one. Same person who made the other one. Finding out we got him in 2011. Yay. Seeing his letter to America, knowing he was right. Oh, so sad.
My God.
Another person looking all sad. Reading
I read Osama bin Laden's letter to America.
The way this letter is going viral right now is giving me the greatest delight because of Palestine.
Anyway, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay. Ugh, these people, just the worst. So, you saw there was a 4,300% increase in searches for bin Laden on X, formerly known as Twitter. There were 5,000 references on Tuesday to bin Laden, and on Thursday, that number was up to 230,000. YouTube saw a 400% increase in searches for bin Laden. This is happening on TikTok, but then it went to Instagram and it went to Twitter as well. First of all, side note, TikTok is a Chinese propaganda outlet. They did that on purpose. They are funneling dissent to America to the youth who, by definition, are ignorant. When you're young, you're dumb. It's just the way it is. When I was young, I was dumb. And a lot of people kind of stay that way for their lives, but a lot of people mature as well. So these people, there are some people who were older, by the way, in that video. They looked older. No excuse for them. But the younger people, okay, you're just young and dumb, but sympathizing with the terrorists, not a good look. I want to go through a little bit of the letter. It is long. It's long to read, so I don't want to read the whole thing because it is about 4,000 words, and that would take a while to read. But I want to read some excerpts from it, and I want to kind of deconstruct it. By the way, I will say, like those people who are in that compilation video, and there are a lot more videos than this. This was just one compilation put together by one guy on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. There are so many more, but I like a lot of those people in the video. I'm going to encourage you. Just go read it. You can find it. You can find it online. There's I believe, let me see. I have it pulled up actually right now on Newsweek. Newsweek has an entire transcript of the letter translated and into English. You can go read it. It's not difficult. It's not a long read, and if you've never read it, it's worth reading. I will say, if you come away from there with conclusions that bin Laden was right about stuff, you should really rethink how you're reading the letter. I'm going to go through why. But let's start by just dissecting the bits of it. The first reason that he starts off by quoting the Quran. This is the first thing that he does. He talks about how his actions are justified because Allah says that those who tread upon Islam, that it is your duty to take revenge. Those are the quotes he pulls from the Quran. And then he says, well, what's the point of the letter? I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about why we attacked you, and I'm going to talk about what you can do to make it better. Those are the two sections of the letter. Well, the first reason, and this is seemingly where people stop reading, is that he blames his actions on the treatment of the Palestinians. This is a quote from the letter. Quote, "The creation and continuation of Israel is one of the greatest crimes, and you are the leaders of its criminals. And of course, there is no need to explain and prove the degree of American support for Israel. The creation of Israel is a crime which must be erased. Each and every person whose hands have become polluted in the contribution towards the crime must pay its price and pay for it heavily." Now, that first paragraph, basically after the quotes from the Quran, that seems to be where people are stopping their reading. They're saying, look, it's because the Palestinians have to deal with the settler colonialism of Israel, and the oppressor is so bad, and da-da-da-da-da. Idiots. That's all I can say. If you stop reading after that first paragraph, you say, bin Laden is just justifying his actions based on the fact that he's a freedom fighter. Well, to be a freedom fighter, you have to fight for freedom. Tell me if the Al-Qaeda Society or the Taliban promote freedom. You're not a freedom fighter. You're not a resistance fighter. And he's not actually doing this for the Palestinians. That's the joke. That's the joke, because I'm going to say something that is possibly controversial here, but it shouldn't be. Like when Bill Maher got canceled because he said that the 9/11 hijackers weren't cowardly, you could say a lot of things about them. They're evil, they're bad, they're misguided. You could say whatever you want, but you can't say they were cowards. Well, what I'm about to say is that bin Laden is not dumb. He's not. You don't plan an attack like the one that took place on 9/11 or the one that happened with the bombing in Kenya. You don't plan those kind of attacks without being somewhat smart. The man was worth something like $100 million. He ran a really well-run engineering firm or construction firm. He was a very wealthy man who chose to live this way. He's not dumb. When you read the letter, it actually is not written poorly. It's not, and it's written in Arabic, so I imagine there's something lost in the translation of the piece, but he's not dumb, okay? He knows what he's doing. What he's doing with this letter is not actually telling you everything that he believes, but what he's doing is appealing to useful idiots in the West who will take his side because he can say the things that he wants to say to sow dissent into Western society. That's his goal. His goal is dissent. His goal is divisive fighting between people in the West and fear. Those are the things that he wants, or he wanted before we killed him. And again, if you know nothing, this makes sense. You'd say, oh, well, it's like listening to these people talk about the situation in Palestine right now and between Gaza and Israel. And you listen to their takes and you go, well, it's important that we try and empathize with other people. It's important that when you want to come to a conclusion or when you want to have an argument or a discussion with people, it's often useful to put yourself in their shoes to try and understand their point of view. So when I try and think about Gaza, when I try and think about what the pro-Palestinians think, I try and put myself in their shoes. So I pretend I'm historically ignorant and morally blind, and then I come to the same conclusions that the pro-Palestinian crowd comes to. And I go, oh, yeah, I get where they're coming from now. I just have to be completely ignorant of history. So when you know nothing and you read this, it makes sense. He goes on, bin Laden in the letter, he goes on to say, quote, "You attacked us in Somalia. You supported the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya, the Indian oppression against us in Kashmir, and the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon. All of this is just a flat-out lie. This is not true. But again, if you read it, which I'm sure these kids have read it, and they go, oh, look, it's because the U.S. is bad. Our foreign policy is so bad. And if you actually know anything, you know that all of these are completely not true. So the U.S. attacked them in Somalia. Oh, you've probably seen Black Hawk Down. You know the U.S. was in Somalia. There were Somalians killed. Therefore, probably the U.S. was the bad guy, right? There was a civil war in Somalia between two people from Somalia. And then, because of that civil war, it destroyed the agriculture and industry in that country. And 4.5 million people were starving to death. The U.S. organized a ceasefire in that conflict so the UN could get food into the country to feed people who were dying because of a civil war. And somehow the U.S. is the bad guy here. Oh, that's our fault. Okay, no. How about the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya? You want to explain how the U.S. supported Russia in that war? The U.S. fought on the side of the Muslims in that war. There are more Bosnians in the United States. There are more Bosnians in St. Louis, where I live, than there are in anywhere else in the world with the exception of Bosnia. And why is that? Because the United States took in refugees by the thousands because they were being killed by the Russians. We're not friends with Russia. We didn't fight on the side of Russia in a genocide against Muslims. That's just totally not true. If you want to attack somebody, you can't blame the actions in Chechnya on the United States. Go attack Russia. How about the Indian oppression against them in Kashmir? Oh, the India and Pakistan are fighting a war over land since 1940. They've been fighting over this land. What does that have to do with the United States? Nothing. The United States has done nothing in that region of India and Pakistan except try and prevent them from blowing each other up with nuclear bombs. We're not fighting on the side of India. We're not. We're supposed to be, quote unquote, tentative allies with Pakistan. We're not fighting against these people. And then lastly, and this one is the kicker that so many people will believe, the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon. Lebanon fought 2 wars against Israel that they started both times. They lost both wars, but that doesn't mean that the Jews are the aggressor. It means that Lebanon's shitty at fighting wars. That's what it means. But again, if you know nothing of history and you read this, you say, oh, well, look at that. It's because the United States has a foreign policy that's bad and, we don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. So that's why these people are believing this. That's why they're reading it and they're going through an existential crisis. It's because they've never read anything in their lives. They go on TikTok and they scroll and scroll and scroll, and that's how they get all their information. They want to watch people get dressed. They want to watch stupid, funny videos of people dressing up their, animals and their kids and whatever they do on TikTok. I don't know. That's what they do. They're not reading books. Now, for young people watching, I don't know if you can see, if you're just listening to the audio, this won't appreciate this, but these things behind me on this shelf, these are books. Now, some of them are for fun. Like I have a section over here of Lee Child. Those are just novels. Those are for fun. I read those for fun. But there are some books on there that contain useful information that you can learn about the world. I would encourage you to pick one up and read it. Maybe one about Israel. Let me just stop this real quick. I'm going to grab a book. How about this? How about this book? Have you ever read this? Alan Dershowitz, The Case for Israel. Now, for those of you who don't know who Alan Dershowitz is, he's one of the most famous lawyers in America, and he also happens to be Jewish. He also happens to be a leftist. Not a leftist. He happens to be a liberal. He happens to be a Democrat. He happens to be someone on the left. Now, how many people do you think have ever read a book like this? The Case for Israel. Probably none. Ooh, you know what? I got one more. Sorry, that took me a second. How about this one? Fighting Terrorism by Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, who is that? Do kids know who Benjamin Netanyahu is? Maybe. He's the Prime Minister of Israel. How about that? Have you ever read a book like this? Oh my gosh, this one even has notes written in it. No, these kids don't know anything. They don't read books. They don't know anything about anything. It's ridiculous. When you read this, if you come across, first of all, I doubt any of these kids got to the end of this letter. Because how do you read this and come away thinking Ben Laden sounds like an enlightened thinker? How about this from later on in the letter? Quote, "You may then dispute that all the above does not justify aggression against civilians for crimes they did not commit and offenses in which they did not partake. This argument contradicts your continuous repetition that America is the land of freedom and it leads the free world. Therefore, the American people are the ones who choose their government by way of their own free will, a choice which stems from their agreement to its policies. Thus, the American people have chosen, consented to, and affirmed their support for the Israeli oppression of the Palestinians, the occupation, the usurpation of their lands, and its continuous killing, torture, punishment, and expulsion of Palestinians. The American people have the ability to choose to refuse the policies of their government and even to change if they want. The American people are the ones who pay the taxes which fund the planes which bomb us in Afghanistan, the tanks that strike us and destroy our homes in Palestine, the armies which occupy our lands in the Arabian Gulf, and the fleets that ensure the blockade of Iraq. These tax dollars are given to Israel for their continued attack against us that penetrate our lands. So the American people are the ones who fund the attacks against us, and they are the ones who oversee the expenditure of their monies in a way that they wish through their elected candidates." Now, how do you read that? Do you read that and say, oh, that sounds like a guy who knows what he's talking about? No. It says that you elected George W. Bush. Therefore, we can kill you. That's what that says. Does that sound like an Enlightenment thinker? Does that sound like a guy who's a real freedom fighter? He's saying, no. You elected a government, and we don't like that government. Therefore, you're open season because what? And do you think it would have been different so you voted for Bush? Oh, how about when you voted for Obama? Do you think his opinion would have changed? No, it didn't change because you vote Democrat. No, it doesn't change. He wants to kill you. He wanted to kill you. He's dead, but he wanted to kill you. And you sit there and you go, oh, he made some good points. No, he doesn't. He doesn't make good points. Now, you could read it. You can read this article and you can come away and you can say, oh, well, that line makes sense. He goes on, by the way, the second half of this where he says, what do you do? Basically, the answer is embrace Islam or die. That's his answer. And the entire second half of this is telling you all the things that you do bad that you need to change. Otherwise, he's going to kill you. This is a quote. We call you to be peoples of manners, principle, honor, and purity, to reject the immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gamblings, and trading with interest. Okay, so how many of these people are going to come out here and say, well, yeah, he made great points about the U.S. foreign policy. Do you also think he made great points about premarital sex or homosexuality or ingesting alcohol or drugs, gambling or trading with interest? You can think that those things are bad. He has a line in here where it, like, again, if you're a conservative like myself, who's more conservative, he attacks President Clinton and his immoral acts that were committed in the office and uses that as justification for his crimes. Here's one you could read in if you say in any other context, you could say, okay, maybe there's a point, which is you say, you are a nation that exploits women like consumer products or advertising tools, calling upon customers to purchase them. You use women to serve passengers, visitors, and strangers to increase your profit margins. You then rant that you support the liberation of women. You say, oh, wow, okay. Am I supposed to sit here and say, well, bin Laden has some great points in that letter because I, too, think that the culture pushes sex too hard? No. Because that's not actually the point of the letter. The point of the letter isn't that he's upset. The point of the letter is everything that you do is haram. It's a sin, and he wants to kill you for it. Because he's not actually concerned about how we treat our women. That's not what he's really saying. What he's saying is if you were Islamic, you would act different. He's not saying, oh, I'm concerned about the plight of women. He's saying those women should be hijabbed, they should be in a burqa, and they should follow Islamic law. That's what he's saying. He's not saying that what I would say, which is that, hey, maybe women shouldn't sell their bodies. That's probably not good for them. I would say that. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that women are exploited and therefore the only solution is Islam. That's the point. It's actually not the point that I would make, which is that, hey, maybe it's bad to have an OnlyFans account because I don't think it makes you happy in the long run. It's, oh, how about this? Do you think maybe the left likes it because he says you have destroyed nature with your industrial waste and gases more than any other nation in history? Despite this, you refuse to sign the Kyoto Agreement so that you can secure the profit of your greedy companies and industry. Does that sound like something the average leftist would say? It absolutely does. Oh, climate change means that we get to bomb the World Trade Center. Does that make sense to you? Is that a good point? Oh, well, he said climate change is a problem, therefore that letter makes some good points. It doesn't make good points. You don't understand it. You don't understand what you're talking about, and you don't understand what he's talking about. He could say a point that out of context, you would agree with, like maybe we shouldn't sell women, or maybe there's a problem with climate change, or maybe there's a problem with the way we lend money. You could read those things, and you could read them from other people. And you could say, well, that's a good argument. But when you read it in the context of the letter, you're missing the context of the letter. He killed 3,000 people before he wrote this. Do you understand that? There's 3,000 people who died before this. And there's actually more than that. Because prior to that, he bombed our embassy in Kenya, which killed a couple hundred people. He's a mass murderer. And when you read it, you could say, well, look at the good points he's made. You could say the same thing about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. You can read his manifesto and say, oh, he made some good points, except that you have to remember it's made by a person who murders people. And so even if they're making a good point, you have to put it in the context of what they're advocating. What they're advocating for is violence. This is not saying that women should respect themselves. This is saying embrace Islam or face the sword. That's what he's saying. He's not saying climate change is a problem, we should address it. He's saying you pollute the earth, embrace Islam, face the sword. That's the choice. It's not really what you're reading. Do you think like Vladimir Putin used to say that the United States were building missiles too close to Russia, that we built bases too close to Russia, therefore it justifies his offensive action against the states around him? You don't look at Vladimir Putin saying that and say, oh, he's saying good points because you support Ukraine. But you're reading Osama bin Laden saying it, and now you're saying, oh, well, he's making good points because the United States builds bases around the world, and therefore we're actually encroaching on them. No, that is not how it works. It's not true. You don't know anything, and I'm sorry to say that, but you don't know anything. You don't think the United States didn't build a base in the Middle East and it made bin Laden mad. Bin Laden's mad because he hates what the United States stands for. He attributes a bunch of stuff that's not our fault. I just went through all the things that he was saying that people are pointing out as good ideas. They're not good ideas. They're not well thought out. What he's doing is using it to turn useful idiots into tools for propaganda. That's what he's doing. These TikTokers out there who support him, you're doing his bidding by saying he's making good points. America is really bad. America's not bad. You're bad. You don't understand that. Getting all fired up here. It just gets to be a rant when I get all agitated at the young people. It's just young people are susceptible to this because they are now being brought up to think that this country is evil, that the country that we live in is bad, and that because of this oppressed matrix that they're taught to view the world through, anyone with power is inherently evil because you only get power by exerting your will over other people. That's how you get power. So the United States is powerful. Therefore, the United States is bad because anyone that we act our will upon is, by definition, the oppressed. So when you look around the world and you say the United States intervened here, we're bad. Oh, Israel is fighting Gaza. Israel has more power. Israel's bad. Oh, we fought the Taliban. Taliban has less power. Therefore, we're bad. It makes no sense when you actually deconstruct it, but that's the way that they think. They view the world through a lens of power. And because you view a world through a lens of power, every interaction is going to necessitate the United States being the bad guy. These people are taught to hate America because America is homophobic, we're sexist, we're racist. We have a history that is so unique in the way that we were bad in the past that the United States is almost irredeemably evil. This is nonsense. Again, historically ignorant, but this is what they're taught. This is what these people believe, these kids. And so when they read bin Laden's letter, it reads like something their teacher in middle school would teach them because that's where your crazy leftists go to indoctrinate the youth. You're not going to get Marxists by talking to a bunch of 50-year-olds who know what the world is like. You're going to make a bunch of Marxists by talking to a bunch of children who don't know and think that it's good. I remember talking to a kid in my family. I'm not going to name names, but they just read Animal Farm. And we were talking. I said, oh, Animal Farm. I love that book. Novella, technically. I love that book. And what'd you think? I said, oh, I thought it was good. Yeah. I said, yeah, what do you think about this? Do you know that it's kind of an allegory about communism? Yeah, we went over that in class, blah, blah, blah. And then said what every kid would think for a minute, which is that I feel like communism could work if you just did it right. This is what kids believe. This is what children believe, which I laugh because this is how the youth think today. They are full of arrogance and hubris. This idea, communism has always failed, always. Everywhere it's tried, it has failed dramatically with the more deaths than anything in history. It is a failed ideology. Karl Marx did nothing good for the world. He was not a good thinker, and his prescription for how to fix society were entirely wrong. This is all true. But kids will look at it and say, well, it makes sense because it's just fair. Everyone works. They all pool their money. Everyone gets what they need from the haves to the needs. It makes sense. And then they think the next step, which is that, well, they just didn't do it right. Stalin, Mao, Kim Jong-un, they just didn't do it right. If I was in charge, I could do it right. And the answer is no, you couldn't. because in order to make everyone equal, you have to kill people. That's the only way. It's where it always ends. Or let's say that you're so benevolent that you refuse and you're going to try and figure out a way. Someone's going to kill you. That's the way it works. It doesn't work the way you think it works because humans are not blameless in society. They are not angels. They will scheme and rob and cheat and steal. They do everything that they can. They're not inherently good. So communism doesn't work because it doesn't work. You want me to draw you a map? Well, there are 30-something countries around the world we can look at and say, well, everywhere it's tried has ended in tragedy and death. But kids believe that. And so these kids that are coming up today, they're taught about Marx. They're taught about all these things. And you should learn about Marx, but you shouldn't be told that he knows what the solution to society is. All we've done now is we've taken the Marxist view of class, and we've applied it to race and gender. And it's ridiculous. But that's what these kids believe. They look around, they're viewing the world through a Marxist lens because that's where your teachers and your people want to teach the youth. And because of that, they can read something written by a mass murdering terrorist who hates them. He doesn't like you. He doesn't want to be your friend. He just described all the other things that you believe. You can read about American foreign policy. You can read about oppressor oppressed. But what about the fornication, the homosexuality, the intoxicants, the gambling? Do you think he is not talking about you when he talks about those things? That guy with the little lisp from the video, I'm just going to go out on a branch and think that he's gay. And not that there's anything wrong with that. No one cares. But do you think bin Laden wouldn't murder you? You're going to read that letter and you're going to say da-da-da. And what are you, skipping over the line which talks about how bad it is to be a homosexual? You're going to skip over that part and think that guy's on your side? He would murder you. Anyway, we're going in a circle here. The only last thing I want to say is that the website that I guess this letter was originally printed on was the Guardian website, and they took it down the other day. And I think that was a mistake. Don't take it down. Let everyone read it. Don't hide it. It drives me nuts. So what they did, they took it down and then they said, we're going to actually redirect you to reporting we did on the letter. Well, it's not your job as a reporter to tell me what the thing says. If you can provide me the thing, you can do both. You can say, here's the letter. Here's how we're going to contextualize it and how we explain it. That's fine. Don't take away the source material and then only give me your interpretation. That's not journalism. That's ridiculous. Don't, because a bunch of idiots read the letter and come to the wrong conclusion to say, well, that means we got to take down the letter from people who want to read it. I was looking for a copy of it. It was hard to find online. I had to go to Newsweek, and it was difficult to find, partly because when you try and search the letter, a bunch of articles about this topic came up instead, but partly because the Guardian removed it. That's cowardly and not your job as a journalistic institution to do. Anyway, that's the last thing I have to say on this. We're going to catch you guys on the next one. This was a long one. Sorry, I was going off today, but this stuff drives me nuts. The youths, they get me. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will catch you next week on the next episode.